Hello and welcome to SLP Full Disclosure. I am your host, Jennifer Martin, and I am very excited to introduce today's guest. She's well known within the SLP world and even better known within the world of travel therapy. And that is exactly what we're going to talk about is how to get started with travel therapy, because that's a question I feel like so many people have is they want to do it, but it's like, how do I get started? And this guest is an expert. Before I introduce our guest, I want to tell you all about our sponsor, AMN Passport app. And on this app, you can find, book, and manage all of your travel assignments. It's kind of your one-stop shopping. So learn more at amnpassport.com. Once again, that is amnpassport.com. So before we jump into our conversation, let me tell you a little bit about her. So this is going to explain it all. Get ready to buckle up and join the ride with Julia Kuhn, the speech-language pathologist who's living her best life of adventure and freedom thanks to travel therapy. Since 2010, she's been gallivanting around the United States for 13-week stretches at a time, giving new meaning to the phrase, work hard, play hard. And when she's not busy being an SLP superstar or relaxing at her home base in the paradise of Hawaii, she's teaching others how to live the dream life through her business, The Traveling Traveler. So if you're ready to add some excitement to your life, hop on board and let Julia show you how it's done. So I don't know if I've ever had a bio that's been that much fun. So welcome, Julia.
Well, thanks for having me, Jennifer. And you asked me to send a bio, and I started writing one that was very plain. And I thought, no, this is not it. We're gonna have more fun on this show because we're talking about travel.
Yes, and it does. I mean, if that bio doesn't make you intrigued to learn more, I don't know. I mean, you had me at Hawaii, so I was like, all right. I want to learn more, especially in the middle of as winter comes to an end. It's like, how do I do what she's doing? So yes, thank you so much. I know, again, you are well known within the traveling world and just SLP world in general, and are a great resource. So before we dive into just even the details of traveling and how to get started, tell us a little bit about your journey and your professional journey, kind of from the beginning until where you're at now.
Well, I guess it all kind of starts with maybe why I wanted to be an SLP, and I know a lot of people are always interested in that. What draws people to this field? Mm-hmm. I had been working in a skilled nursing facility since I was 15 years old, doing activities assistant work, dietary assistant work, and that's where I found out about SLP and decided this is the career I wanted to take. So I actually got a CF in the SNFs back in 2009, was really excited. It was like my dream job. It's where I wanted to be. But then after about a year, I started wanting more time off. And I knew I had this yearning to travel. I wasn't able to travel much during school, didn't have the funds for it. So I was like, I want to travel. I'm in my 20s. I want to do this. And that's where I found travel therapy, because it seemed like the way that I could get more time off during the year. I wasn't limited to 10 or 14 days off a year. I could work 3 or 6 months, take 2 weeks off, take these trips I wanted to take while I was still younger and kind of traveling a different way than I might now, even like 15 years later. So that's how I got into travel. And at the time, there were no blogs. I really didn't know people doing it. We had travelers at my SNF that would come in and work. No SLPs. We had like a CODA, a PT. So I kind of learned a little through just talking to them. I mean, this is before Facebook groups, before Instagram. So we kind of learned the old school way of just talking about it. But I went out and did it and kind of never looked back. I've been taking at least one travel assignment a year since 2010. Some years I worked like full-time, like 4 assignments a year. Some years I worked half a year and kind of traveled or took off the rest of the year. So my journey has changed a lot, but it's all revolved around travel for about the past 13 years.
Wow. And so there's so many things. I'm like, what were like, did you have a family connection to the SNFs? What that brought you there to at age of 15? Because That's not where most teenagers are hanging out. So,
Yes, I actually did. You called me out there. My mom was a social worker in a SNF, and
okay.
I I knew I liked that environment. I volunteered a lot when I was younger. I did a lot of volunteer work all through college too. So I volunteered a lot, just doing random things like talking to the residents in the SNF. And when I turned 15, like that's when you could legally work in Pennsylvania. I was like, I need money. I need a job. This wasn't debatable. Actually, because I wanted to take a trip. Like there was a school trip I wanted to go on. I needed a couple $100s. So I was like, I need to work and make income. And I think I might have applied at some places like a grocery store, stuff like that. But my mom having the in at the nursing home definitely got me a job there. So kind of never looked back. And actually, my first major in college was food science. I've always been interested actually in like microbiology and like the study of kind of like diseases. So I was interested in doing like food kind of disease work. But then the more I got into lab courses in college, the more I was like, I'm interested in this work I was doing in the skilled nursing facility. Like I always really, really enjoyed my work there. I was like, I want to do something like this. And that's when I started looking at the careers within healthcare within the SNF, and that's really when I found SLP.
Okay, that makes sense.
I worked in the SNF all through. I worked in the SNF all through college, all through grad school. Even though I went away, they still let me keep my job and come back on holidays, since a lot of people wanted to take off in the holidays and summers. So I worked. It's weird. I worked at that SNF 8 years, and I believe that's the longest I've ever held a job because I'm a traveler. So.
Well, and you started at 15,
yeah,
so
yeah.
it helps. Okay, that makes sense. I was like, okay, before we continue, I have to know that. But getting into the travel piece, so I think that's really interesting because when I got out of grad school, which is before you got out of grad school, it was very much where I'd heard about travel, but it was always PTs or OTs. I felt like there was nobody that I'd ever heard of in the SLP world doing it. So
yeah,
it sounds like, did you have to, like, once you heard about this from the PTs, OTs, was it, oh, let me go look and see if there is something like for SLPs, or did a company call you? Like, how did you even get introduced to it?
I guess in talking to the OTs and PTs, they were like, there's definitely speech jobs. Like, everybody knew you could be a traveling SLP. And I did at the time what was a popular thing to do, which was put my resume on monster.com. So I don't know if this
You're speaking my language.
Yeah, I don't know if this still happens, but within like 30 minutes, I got 100 calls. Like my voicemail was full of recruiters being like, yeah, we'll place you. Like, yeah, wherever you want to go. So I went from, I guess, not knowing there were even any jobs to being completely overwhelmed. Like when I got those like 10, 20, 30, however many calls it was coming in, I didn't return a single one. I was just like, this is too much. So then I stepped back a little more. And maybe a couple months after I put my resume on Monster and the calls kind of died down, I got a fairly local phone number calling me. It was from New Hampshire, and I lived in Boston at the time. It was a company that was based out of New Hampshire. So I picked up the phone. And it was a relatively like local guy who was a recruiter, and he was talking to me about a job like in that area. And him and I actually kind of connected over that phone call. That ended up being my first recruiter. But that's kind of how I ended up working with a recruiter. Was I was like, okay, like this felt like somebody I could connect with at the time. And so that's how I ended up kind of going through getting a job, because just getting calls from like 30 companies was really overwhelming.
Yeah. And that leads me exactly to what I was going to ask you next is, there are so many companies now. And so, how did you, it sounds like with this particular one, it was the fact that it felt like he was close to where you were physically, but also that you were able to really form a connection. So what would you say if somebody's thinking about doing travel, like how should they decide who they want to work with, and what are some of those like really important questions that they should ask to determine if that's the relationship they want to have?
Yeah, I mean, it's getting kind of harder to answer that question too, because technology is doing so much for us now. Like,
Mm.
I feel like the role of the recruiter is maybe getting like less and less as like technology job boards are becoming more and more. So I would say if it just sometimes it's just a gut feeling. Like it was like that call I had with that recruiter that was kind of local. It was like this just feels like we can have a professional relationship. I feel like I can communicate well. So it's like, can you communicate with the person? Are you on the same page? Do you feel like you're having like mutual goals? They're being honest with you about communication. I think referrals from like friends or people in the industry are still really good. Although like I've referred so many people over the years to my recruiters, and I definitely know like what works for one person doesn't work for another. So it's not like just because that person worked for your friend, it's going to work for you. But I mentioned technology and the role of the recruiter getting less and less because now it's like a recruiter in the past used to have to do all the work for you. Like they had to know, they had to like be inside your mind and think like, Julia wants to go here and she wants this much money. And then tell you that, like physically call you and tell you what jobs are available. Now we have all these job boards that we can look to like and see all the jobs listed and see their pay. And, like your company has one that I use. So it's like we can just tell our recruiter what they want, what we want, and then they can follow up. So it's almost like if you're good using the technology, I also feel like the role of the recruiter is becoming a little smaller and smaller. And, that could be a good or a bad thing. But like, I love the technology. I love, like my recruiter that I use through like AMN now, like I look at the online job board, select what jobs I'm interested in, and then she'll contact me about them. So there's all this great technology that we can use and utilize that makes the role of the recruiter still important, but like a lot more is on us now too.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's more where you have a little bit more control over it.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking too, do you think it's if it is new for someone that's saying, I've never done this, I'm a little bit nervous. Do you think it's important? And you made a great point that just because somebody worked for me doesn't mean they're going to work for everybody I refer. But do you think it's important to even in that initial conversation, maybe that you as the traveler do a little interview with the recruiter to say, how do you communicate? How often, where do you place people? What disciplines do you work with most to just get an idea if that's going to be a good fit?
Absolutely. And I encourage that everyone should interview a couple recruiters. Try to interview 5, 10 if you can, and maybe get 2 or 3 that you really like. And I always try to tell people like if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't mean it doesn't work for somebody else. Like just make sure it's your communication style. Like some people can be really, really quick. Like they don't like to talk a lot. And if you like to talk a lot, that might not work. So find what works for you.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion because you're right to say, this is how often I would love to hear from you. This is how I want to communicate. This is because you're right. If you don't set that up in the beginning, it's easy for those hiccups to happen. So
yeah.
And so when you first started, did you feel some comfort in being closer to home, or were you feeling like send me wherever? Like what was your mindset on that?
The first assignment I did in an area I was relatively familiar with. So that worked for me. Like, and I'd recommend that to people too. Like if you could take a job, maybe like 2.5 or 3 hours from home that you could potentially like commute back and kind of just deal with all the stuff at home too. Like, maybe your mail is kind of lingering. It might still get sent home or something. So I think being a close distance to your home is a good way for a lot of people to start out, that you could still drive home easily. But also, if you just want to be crazy and take that leap and go like 3,000 miles, like good for you. I've seen it work a million times. I've worked and lived in Hawaii since 2016 now, and I've seen so many travelers here. It's their first assignment, and they're coming from New York. They're coming from Boston. So like, good for them. They're doing it. So if you feel like you just want to go halfway across the country or across the country, do it. But if you think, okay, I'm not sure, I want to take something close to home, I think either way is acceptable for sure.
Like maybe get your feet wet and then say, or just say, okay, I'm going to go big and send me, wherever it sounds like the best opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it sounds, so you've always done sniff.
No, I did sniff my first couple years I was practicing. And now for maybe the past 6 or 7 years, I've primarily done acute care, some inpatient rehab, I've done home health.
Okay. So adults.
Yeah, always adults. Yeah, I've never worked in the schools. That's never done pediatrics.
Yeah. And you said something that I thought was really interesting in the beginning because, I started out in hospitals and acute and outpatient, and I quickly realized that I didn't want to do that because they didn't close. Like, I'm like, this place is open 24/7, 300. And so, but you said something where I do think that is a real benefit to the travel that I hadn't thought about is you can do the medical and not have to be working at a place that's 24/7, 365. I mean, they're still open, but that doesn't mean you are working there. So it is a nice way to have that balance and time off, but also stay in the medical.
Right. And a lot of travelers take off the month of December. And I do too for the most part. And I don't blame them. Like it's hard year in and out. Like every year it's like, oh, you're working Thanksgiving, you're working Christmas, you're working New Year's. Traveler, it's like, okay, I'm taking the rest of the year off. Like this is my time. So it's nice to be like selfish in that way. And when you're on assignment, you're working hard. A lot of times assignments will want you to work like a weekend day, which honestly I kind of like. Like if I'm at a place I don't know, why not work a weekend day, then have off a day during the week to do your chores and errands when nobody else is around? Like, so I think it all ends up working out with the schedule and timing pretty well.
Yeah. So it's like you can call the shots, but also knowing that you may have to just work around the company's schedule or the facility schedule a little bit when you are working.
Yeah.
And I know it's been a minute since you've been doing the travel therapy, but when you think back to the beginning, what would you say were the biggest learning curves or things that you're thinking, oh my gosh, if I had known that, or that was really challenging? Like what? I know it's been a while, but do you remember any of those?
At the time, housing was and really still is one of the biggest ones. So I did start traveling either right before Airbnb came out or like at the inception of it. And now the big like website for traveler housing is called Furnish Finder. So I definitely started before that. So at the time, finding housing was just so hard. I was like, how do I do this? So that was a challenge, and it still is a challenge, mostly now because the prices of everything have gone up. So you're constantly searching for like good deals. But I would say housing was one of the biggest challenges, and just kind of seeing different styles of like productivity management and stuff. Like I came from working at a SNF that had like relatively good productivity requirements. I felt like I was always in like the best place for my patients. And then some of the places I was working as a traveler was like, go, 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 go. You're just, nonstop, like on the clock. So that was a hard adjustment too. But I think it's something as a traveler, you kind of will have those assignments that are really pushing your productivity, then some won't so much. It's more the SNFs that do.
And would you say it's just really having to change that mindset to, you're hitting the ground running. There's not this ramp up period where if you're a permanent employee, you may have a little bit more time, but you got to be ready to go.
Yeah. You're going. And that's how the SNFs are. You're just going, and seeing your patients. And you have to really be in the mindset of like, this is like, I'm a traveler, I'm a contractor, this is what I'm doing. And you push those 8 hours out, they go really fast. And then you kind of have your own time to do whatever you want to do on the nights and weekends.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting too, because I know, you can also travel and do a school assignment.
Yeah.
And I think those give you a little bit more of that where it's, you're ramping up just as you would if you were a permanent employee. But I do think you're right that the medical, there is where you need to just, but you probably become an incredibly strong clinician because of it.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
anything after that.
My clinical skills have improved a lot as a traveler, and just interpersonal skills, management, everything. It forces your mind to expand. Like, you also just have to always be learning new things. So whereas like if you're always working in the same place, you can get really boxed in with your thinking. You're always just forced to like learn and expand.
Yeah. Well, and that's really, that's where we grow, like it or not.
Yeah.
If we have to leave that comfort zone, and that's where I'm sure if you look back at yourself starting versus now, you probably don't even recognize yourself professionally.
No, yeah, it's a completely different person.
Yeah. And going back to the housing, like what would you say, would recommend to somebody who would be new to this, who, what would you recommend to them for finding housing and some of the tools they can use for that?
I would suggest using the sites available online. The website Furnish Finder has like something like 200,000 hosts on it that primarily rent to travel nurses and travel therapists. So look at that site, look at Airbnb. If you're not finding anything, I always think it's a good idea to try to book something. And whether it's like a hotel, an Airbnb for a week, try to get something that actually go to your assignment, and just start talking to the people where you're working and seeing if they have any leads. Even like looking around the neighborhood, speaking to local realtors, seeing if they have anything. Because things can pop up by word of mouth, but usually the word of mouth is like the people actually at the facility. So it could take some time to hear everything. So if you can book a hotel or an Airbnb for a week and then try to find something, that can be helpful.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. So basically, if you don't immediately find housing before you're going to start, don't let that deter you, because there are extended stays and other things where, you're right. Once you get there and say, hey, somebody might say, oh, my friend rents out a room, or there's this option. So you're right. So don't let that be a block to getting started.
Yeah.
Okay. No, and you're right. Thankfully there just are so many resources now where you can look up. I know there's Facebook groups that are just for travel housing, where people are posting all the time, like, here's what I have available, here's where it's at. So there's a lot of resources now.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot more than I started. It's a lot easier.
Yeah. You're like, kids these days, they have it so easy.
I know, really.
And one of the other, things that I hear often from people that are a little bit nervous, is like, well, how do you meet people? I don't know anybody in this area. So what are your suggestions for like how to get involved in a community and how to meet people?
What I suggest is I think everyone really first has to get to know themselves. And this was one of the harder things for me when I started traveling. So looking back, I was really lonely a lot of my assignments. And I realized it was because most of what I did with my free time was more or less just like hang out with my friends who had been people I'd known from school or just my whole life, and like eat or gossip or talk. And I really didn't like know myself or know my hobbies. So being in a new place where it's like, well, what I normally do is just sit and talk to these people, it was hard. And what I ended up doing was just finding out what I like to do. So I really like being outside and like walking and hiking, do photography. So once I kind of realized that stuff about myself, then I could seek out other people who wanted to do the same things. And there's a lot of places for that. Just because I like to hike, I'll use that as an example. I go to a website called meetup.com.
Oh, yeah.
And for almost every place I've been in, there's been a hiking group, and they're usually free. Sometimes they're like a $5 fee to join, but you join their little club. It's like a club you can join. And then they have lists of hikes you can do. And I've met a lot of friends through the meetup hiking groups. There's also similar things on Facebook. If you get good with searching for and I always recommend people who are travelers get really good at searching, whether it's Facebook, Google, whatever it is, because there's groups and stuff out there. You just have to know the words to find them. But a lot of places I go, I'll search for the town I'm in and then hiking group on Facebook, or even look for local groups on Facebook. And you'll end up finding people who like the same things as you if you're out searching for them. And sometimes you end up with great coworkers too. I never expect my coworkers to be my host or be my friend. Some coworkers, they have travelers coming in and out. They're just kind of I'm not into the travelers. They come and go. They want long-term relationships. And I understand that. I can usually feel out right away if somebody really wants to maybe develop a relationship with me or not professionally. But sometimes you come in and you can tell there's the people who love travelers. They usually tell you, they're I love travelers. I love showing you around. So sometimes you get those people who just want to take you to do all their favorite things. But I don't expect it. It's cool when it happens. But then sometimes you'll get on an assignment with a lot of travelers in it too, or a lot of travelers in the area. So there's an app called MedVenture app now, and that's just an app for traveler meetups.
Oh, wow.
So you can look for travelers on that, look for events. There's also Facebook groups of travelers. So there's actually now a lot of ways to meet people. But like I said in the beginning, I always think it's important to actually know what you want to do and seek out your hobbies. And even if you do them by yourself, I know hiking by yourself isn't a great idea, but at least you're kind of doing what you like to do and filling your time in ways you want to.
Yeah, and those are great suggestions. I mean, I feel like, just putting yourself out there is where you people aren't going to come knock on your door. You got to put yourself out there. And I love that idea of if you're doing things that you like and you're interested in or want to learn more about, then you're going to find other people that you probably have a lot in common with. And do you feel, and I love that too, where it sounds like don't be offended if your coworkers are not embrace, because you're right. It is where if they're used to that, it's well, I don't want to start this friendship and then have them leave.
Yeah.
But do you feel like if they are having, a happy hour or doing something and everybody's invited to put yourself out there, go to those things.
Yeah, definitely.
Be part of that.
Yeah. And I usually do that.
Yeah. So it sounds like any place you've wanted to get involved and meet people, you've been able to.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And do you ever start to see some of the same people in the traveler rotation where you're oh, I'm back here and this person's back here too? Or is that pretty rare?
I've crossed paths with a bunch of people. It's, there's a lot, even though California is a huge state, it's geographically the size of the whole Northeast. You get in the same rotation with people, even doctors I've noticed. I was recently in Northern California, an hour from the Oregon border, and I was saw the name of a doctor who I was I have worked with that doctor before. And I Googled him, and he worked in Southern California in Palm Springs, which is a 15-hour drive away. I'm how are we on the same schedule here? But it's a small world. It sounds definitely remember that, because if you do things that are unprofessional or you make people mad, it is a lot smaller of a world than you think in therapy.
I was just going to say, be kind to everyone. Yeah. Don't burn bridges. It's a small world. Even though it doesn't feel like it, it is. I agree. So, and what would you say personally, just having done this for so long, do you find are the pros and cons of travel therapy?
You can probably guess some of my pros by now. I love the flexibility. I love just being able to take time off. Last year I worked one job. This year I haven't worked a job yet. I'm not sure if I'm going to, but it's let me expand my life in different ways. I do all this content creation and work on social media. I couldn't imagine doing that any other way other than working travel assignments and kind of time blocking my time. So it's amazing with the flexibility and freedom. You get to travel and to some really cool places that you might not think to take a vacation to, or would just be really maybe challenging to get to anyway, like some of the places in Hawaii or California. Like you get to see so many places and expand your clinical skills. I think that everybody should probably job hop every 1 or 2 years regardless, if not to maybe negotiate and make more money, just to learn new skills on the job. And as a traveler, you get to do that every 3 or 6 months. You're getting to work a job, go someplace else. So it's a great way to learn as a clinician. You're learning by seeing new patients, working with new coworkers, learning how different places do things. So those are my big pros. That's why I keep on doing it. But then the cons, I think it depends on the person. Some people definitely don't like travel at all. It's not for them, probably never would be for them. But if you have a family and close family ties, like children, it could be hard to travel with them, but not impossible. It can be hard to be away, can be lonely. It's also very kind of high risk, high reward, where we do get paid well, but our contracts could get canceled really at any notice, maybe a 2-week notice. It almost never happens in the schools. Schools are fairly guaranteed that you're going to have your contract all year long, but medical, we could get canceled and replaced by a permanent person pretty easily. So there's that risk. There's that risk of having to leave a job, but I figure that's all just part of the journey, and I don't take anything personally. If my contract gets canceled, just try to move on to the next one.
It's you have the perfect personality for this. Just thinking of oh my gosh, there's probably a reason that you've had this longevity doing this, because and going back to some of the pros, because it almost, hearing you talk about it, just sounds like it has really created this very rich life for you. you probably would have never been living in Hawaii had you not gone down this road. It probably was never something as your 15-year-old self in the skilled nursing is thinking, well, one day I'm going to be living in Hawaii. Doing some of the other things that you've been able to do because of this, never in a million years, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and just the places I've traveled to, we hear it oh, you have to work 50 years, then you can travel when you're retired. And what I've realized, I'm only in my late 30s now, but it's you travel differently as you age. So when I was in my 20s and early 30s, when I wasn't taking travel assignments, I was backpacking and staying in hostels and doing these kind of just dirty traveler hippie stuff. And I have the best memories. I met the best people. I'm so happy I did it. But I'm I don't want to travel like that anymore. I want to stay in a little nicer place and maybe just go a little slower, go to one place for a week versus hitting 20 European countries in 3 weeks. So it's you get to experience travel more throughout your life. And I'm really happy I've been able to do that too. Just as somebody who loves to travel.
Yeah, and that's such a good point, because you're right. We have this mindset well, I'm going to work and work and work. And then when I finally am done working, then I'm going to take advantage. But you've been able to incorporate that throughout your professional life, which is great. And, and even though, like you said, it's more from probably, hostels to you want your own bathroom, maybe, let's just say.
I like the hostel environment actually. And I will still do it if I can have my own private room and potentially my own private bathroom, but I won't do a dorm again. That's too much.
Yeah, there's definitely a season for that.
Yeah.
And just kind of going to some of the cons, do you feel was there ever a time when you felt I just wanted to put down roots? I'm just kind of tired of bouncing around, or what does that look like?
Yeah, I have. And I've taken perm jobs a couple times as a traveler, mostly for about a year. So that's the other thing. It's permanent jobs are always there. If you decide you're going to be a traveler, it's not like you're making a lifelong commitment. You can always go back and forth. Travel's always going to be there. Or what I've really learned is like permanent jobs are always there. When I was a young CF, I was like so afraid of like, I don't know, getting a job. Like I thought I'd never get the job I wanted. Like I was always trying to increase my skills and network, thinking I got to get this like great job. Then I got offers for the great jobs. I realized they paid kind of crap. And then I was traveling, had great jobs in traveling. And over the years, I just kind of realized like every job is always open at one time or another. Like as a speech therapist, you're never going to not have a job. Yeah. It's probably going to be a job you like. So if you tried travel and you want to stop for a year or two. And through my years, there have been plenty of people I've known that just come back and forth. Like some people take a couple years off, then they're back. Some people travel. A lot of people travel to find a place they want to live too. So a lot of people end up traveling, finding a place they really like, and then staying perm and never regret it. So it's just whatever you want to do in your season of life, I think travel will take you there.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I tell people is it's a way to try before you buy. You know? And many times it is where you find, oh, this is exactly what I want to do. But there's other times where you think, great, I'm glad I tried that. And now I'm done.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think those are some great points that you make. And I know this can be kind of, there's polarizing, but what are your thoughts just having done this on new graduates going right into travel?
I think so. Years ago, I was very, very against it. And a lot of it was just the technology, the way it was marketed. I've seen so many improvements to the CF systems over the years that as it stands now, there's programs that CFs can do where they can work in the schools. It's 9-month contracts. They have telesupervision of their CF supervisor. They have usually additional mentorship from the companies. So for me now, if people want to do a travel CF in the schools, I think it's fine. I used to not support CFs traveling, but given all the support that they have now, I think it's fine as long as it works for them. I mean, again, I can't imagine finishing a grad program, being in all that debt, never making money, and then like traveling to a new job and doing all that. So the people who do it, I think good for them. It's pretty hard, but yeah, if they want to do it and go in the school CF programs, I support it.
Mm-hmm. So do you feel like, and I know like, they've changed some of the requirements where you can have some virtual supervision, but there's still a component where part of it has to be there on site. But do you feel like, so you're right. I mean, I think in the schools that just lends itself to being easier. What are your thoughts if somebody wants to travel and do their CF in a SNF, for example?
That would be hard. I mean, I know it could happen, but I think that would be really, really hard because of the job opportunities. Like SNFs don't want to hire a traveling CF. It's not that like an agency wouldn't want to place them, or it's that when especially in a SNF, when you're a traveler, you're the only person there. I don't know if I've ever had a travel job in a SNF where I worked with somebody else. So it's just you. And then, they're not able to provide supervision and mentorship. So that would be a lot harder. I mean, I don't want to say impossible. Of course, I've met people who've done it over the years and they're always like trying to prove me wrong that it's possible. And I think it's worked for people. It obviously has, but it's going to be very rare. And I would say if you're thinking about that as a CF, just go and do a medical job somewhere for 9 months or a year. Go perm, and then get into travel. Travel's always there. It'll always be there.
That's a great suggestion. Yeah, and I always tell new grads too. I'm like, you don't want to, if you have a 13-week. I mean, unless you could have that 9 months consecutive, it's going to be so hard. And you're right. The idea is that it's a good experience, and if you're the only one there and don't have support, that's going to be tricky. Versus as school is more conducive to you do have that whole time. So, and I know you've said a few times just you're down to doing one assignment a year.
And
So tell us about, what obviously doing travel therapy has allowed you, changed your professional trajectory. So what else, what are you doing when you're not doing your assignment?
Well, yeah, it definitely changed my professional trajectory. One thing that was really cool about travel, and so I actually super recommend travel to anybody who's like thinking about getting out of the field too. Like travel can be for anybody. It can be for new grads, people who've been in the field and love SLP, but also if you're thinking of transitioning out, one of the things I did years ago was I took like a 4-week boot camp in digital marketing. And I was able to do that, of course, because of travel. I finished my assignment, then I was able to go to this boot camp and learn digital marketing. So I built all these skills I might not have been able to learn otherwise, or it would have taken me years to learn. And so when I'm not traveling, I run my business, The Traveling Traveler, and I get income by selling different products to travelers. I sell like continuing education subscriptions, get a commission for that. I place people with recruiters. I sell a course that teaches people how to travel. So I have that income, which is, it's good. But then I also freelance myself out to other places as a professional copywriter, professional content creator. I have one big account I work with where I do all their social media and email marketing. So being a traveler has like lended me to be able to take on those other things and expand my skills. So like last year I worked that one job and I made $30,000 in 3 months. It's like travel can be so much money. It's like, that's more than some people make in an entire year. So it's like you get that money. Okay, I'm kind of set for the year. Then you can do other things. So that's really a nice thing about travel.
Yeah, I mean, I think basically what I'm listening to you, I'm thinking what's our most valuable commodity? Time. And this has allowed you time to do other things that had you been working perm nonstop, you would not have had the time or energy, because you would have been doing things like this on the evenings and the weekends, and it's not impossible. It's just harder. So you were able to really focus on it.
It's a lot harder. And if you are watching this, thinking about maybe doing other work, transitioning out of the field, and you feel like your brain isn't letting you do it, I will say something I've noticed is it is so hard to switch between working in like as an SLP and doing other work, because the SLP work is so mentally draining. Like I feel like when I come home, and maybe it's because I'm an introvert too, but I come home at the end of the day and I'm like, I'm done. Like I had a client last year who just really wanted me to write one email, write like 200 words. And I couldn't do it for weeks because I was just working. And it's something about just that work that we do that's really draining, that it takes time away from it to really, like, for me at least, open up your brain to be able to do these other things. So that's, again, one of the great things about travel is I feel like I just time block my year. Like when I work as an SLP, I work as an SLP. That's all I do. And I don't feel like I have to do these other things. But then during the other time, I'm able to do everything else and kind of prepare myself, obviously, for when I'm taking that assignment. Now, for what I do, we have like schedulers, like all the stuff you see that comes out maybe while I'm working, I've actually written and scheduled like months in advance. But, it's like I can kind of only do one thing at a time.
Yeah, that is such a great point. And it really does, because I think we want to do other things, but you're right. This is it's a lot of mental work to work as an SLP. So then it's like your resources are limited to do other things, even though you may really want to. So, well, and to close out, I mean, you've given so many great pieces of advice and information, but is there anything that you feel like to end on, where if somebody's saying, I don't know if I want to do travel, I don't know, what do you think? I mean, what would you say would be your advice to them?
I would say, don't upheaval your life to do travel. Like, I think a lot of people think doing travel means like they have to sell their house and like move in with their parents and like create like a whole travel life. Like you can keep your apartment, you can, stay per diem at your current job and give travel a try. Like it, and if you don't like it, you can go back. I would just say you can give it a try without changing your entire life at home. Like don't feel like everything has to change for travel. And if you find you take a job and you like it, yeah, then maybe you can start like reducing your footprint at home, like moving things around so you're more nomadic, but just give it a try.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. It's because I think you're right. People think, well, I have to make this a complete life shift, but it sounds like if you wanted to do that, you absolutely could.
Yeah.
But you don't have to. So there's options. And I think one thing you said, which it's so important, and I'm constantly reminding myself of this, is you try it. If it doesn't work, it's not for you, so be it. You go back to, it's not like it's not a tattoo.
Yeah.
It's not, it's, you can definitely try things and see if they're for you or not. So, well, Julia, this has been so helpful. And I can just, your passion for this it's evident. And I love that you're now, because the other work that you're doing, I think is so valuable, because it's not just you saying, well, yeah, I think this, you've lived it, you've breathed it. Okay. So I love that you're now sharing that information and expertise with others, because you have a lot of it in this area. So thank you for doing that.
Well, thanks. And thanks for having me, Jennifer. It's great to talk to you.
And that wraps up this episode. Thank you for tuning into SLP Full Disclosure. For more information about this episode, check out the show notes on our website at medtravelers.com/SLP Full Disclosure. And don't forget to leave us a review and subscribe so you never miss a guest. Are you interested in becoming a travel SLP? Visit medtravelers.com to learn more and explore the exciting opportunities we offer at top-level facilities across the country. Also, a special thanks to Jonathan Carey for producing this episode and Aiden Dykes for the music and editing. And as always, this episode was powered by Med Travelers. See you next time.